I need you. I need you, Jesus.
Right now, I am going to ask Kelly Stauffer to come up, and she is going to share a very personal, very emotional experience that she has had in her life. I first saw Kelly back at the 2008 Maryland March for Life, where she gave her testimony. I did not meet her. I didn't meet her until the fall when we engaged in the first ever 40 Days for Life in Severna Park. Kelly was the campaign director and really helped get me going and included and running in the pro-life movement. So I will now introduce to you Kelly Stauffer.
Hi, I'm with an organization, Silent No More, which is a group of women, if you don't know, that speak out about their personal experience with abortion, which I think is extremely necessary because, like Michael said, it's a taboo subject in our culture and nobody wants to talk about it, but Silent No More is a group of women and men who refuse to think of it as a taboo subject. So when my testimony is when I was 13 years old, I lost my virginity and got pregnant. I wasn't raped. I wasn't forced into it in any way. I was just not a very smart little girl. And so I got pregnant, but at that time I didn't really understand my body that much, so the changes that were going on I didn't understand, and my period wasn't regular, so that wasn't a red flag for me. And so it was 5 months before I realized that something was wrong. And I went to the doctor, and my doctor felt around and said, "You're pregnant." And I was like, "Oh, that can't be true. It's been 5 months since I've had sex, and just that one time." And she said, "Well, then you're 5 months pregnant." So she told my stepmother, and my stepmother told my father, and they also were ignorant to what choices were available to us. We lived right down the street from a pregnancy center, but we didn't know what that was or what resources they had. Like anyone in a trauma, I went to my pastor at my church and I said, well, what does God say about this? What does the church say about this? I'm really torn on what I should do. And my pastor said, well, our particular church in our discipline says that, it's a personal choice. And in this case, you're very young, and if you pray really hard about it and you come to the conclusion that abortion is the right answer, then God will understand. So my pastor told me that this was the right choice. My stepmother and father felt like, they had big dreams for me. They wanted me to go to college. They wanted me to do all these great things, and a baby would just get in the way and also probably ruin their reputation of being such fine, upstanding people. So abortion was the only answer. I called my mother, who was a very strict Catholic. She lived in a different state, so I called her, and, I said, "Mom, I'm pregnant." The very first words that came out of her mouth were, "Well, there's only one thing you can do." And I thought, after hearing her in heated debates many times in my life, I thought she was going to say, "You have to give it up for adoption." But that wasn't what she said. She said, "There's only one thing you can do, and that's have an abortion." So when it was her daughter, all of her convictions fell apart. And so, because I was so far along, our doctor, who was very close with our family, recommended that we go see Dr. George Tiller because he was the best in the country at performing this very dangerous procedure. So, 4 or 5 days after finding out that I was pregnant, I was on a plane to see Dr. George Tiller in Kansas. It's a 5-day procedure there, and every morning you stay at a hotel, and every morning you drive through these sidewalk counselors who now I understand the motives of sidewalk counselors. But as a 14-year-old child in a traumatic time in my life, driving through these people holding signs of dead fetuses, I didn't feel love from them. I didn't feel that they were there to pray for me. All I felt was that they were holding it in my face, the tragedy of abortion, which needs to be seen. I completely agree with that. But from my personal point of view, probably right in front of the abortion clinic might not be the best place. Maybe I'll pray for you. I have information for you. I will help you. Those things would probably have been more effective. But instead, it just traumatized me more. And so I went in there and, signed some papers, I'm sure said things that I didn't really read, and so I signed my child's life away at any cost. And they have counseling where you sit with these other women and you hear their stories. Basically, you're counseling each other. There's no real person leading any kind of discussion. It's just you're talking to the others as one of you is put into another room and brought back one at a time. But while I was in there, I heard the stories of the other women that were having late-term abortions. And many of them, there was one woman who her child had Down syndrome, she was told, and so she was aborting. There was another who was 19, and so she felt she was too young to have a baby. But there was also another woman that rode to and from the hotel with us, so I got to know her pretty well, and I never really understood why she had come to this late understanding of not wanting a child, because she was perfectly married, had a great job, was 34 years old, and I kept wondering to myself, why would you wait so long? But I myself had waited a really long time, so who was I to judge? But, one at a time, they'd bring us into a different room, and while you're in that room, they would stick these things called laminara, which is expandable seaweed, that unnaturally, I'm sorry that everybody's just eaten. If anybody gets grossed out, please leave, because there's no children, so I'm not going to spare any details today. They slowly dilate your cervix to, like a pregnant woman going into labor, her cervix would naturally dilate, but they're forcing you into labor. And so you unnaturally are dilating. Any woman that's had a child, it hurts when it's happening naturally. It really hurts when it's happening unnaturally. They don't give you any pain medications or anything like that. It's just... So for 4 days, that's what you do. You go into these rooms, they stick it in there, you expand. You go into the room again, they stick it in there, you expand. So on the 4th day, I went into the room again, and I thought that's what they were going to do again, is just stick some more of that in there. It was going to expand. It was going to hurt. I'd been through it for 4 days. But my child, my girl, Corey, I knew from sonograms that it was a girl, perfectly formed, beautiful. She really began to move this one time and doing somersaults. And I kept thinking to myself, what is going on in there? Did I eat something? Why are you so active right now? And somehow she must have known, because Dr. George Taylor walked into the room several minutes later, very cold and quiet, and said, "This will all be over soon," inserted a really long needle into my abdomen, and almost immediately I never felt my baby move again. So now I have to go back to the hotel knowing that I've murdered my child, and she's still inside of me. And they never explain what's going on or what the process is. You just walk through it blindly. So then the next day, they put all of us in hospital beds in a big room. There's no privacy or comfort or anything. It's one big room, 10 hospital beds, and all these women are in their own hospital bed, basically just in pain by themselves. The nurses sit at a nurse's station, but they're not at your bedside holding your hand, there for women, as they like to say that they are. I mean, they came over every now and then to throw another blanket on me because I was shaking so violently from, I guess, pain. I don't know. And they give you an IV to put you in this state of consciousness where, you're awake, but you're groggy, and they can tell you what to do, but you're kind of, drugged up. And so the nurse would go down the line of women and shove her hand up under the blanket and feel if you were dilated enough. And if you were put in a wheelchair and wheeled off to another room. So finally it was my turn. And she put me in the wheelchair and wheeled me and my IV off into another room. And this other room kind of looked like a closet. And there was a toilet in the middle of this closet. It wasn't a bathroom, and so I was kind of confused, but groggy. And the nurse helped me out of the wheelchair and put me on that toilet. And she said, "Push." And so I did. And it was hard to push. And so she would, thank you. She told me to lean on her. So that's what I did. I leaned on her and I pushed until my child was left in a toilet. because that's what our country says is legal and okay and a choice. But my daughter Corey didn't have a choice at all. So when I left there, they handed me a pack of birth control pills and said, "See you later. No, come back for a visit. No, we want to know how things go." Nothing. And I was really depressed because my body was thinking that it had a child to care for, but there was no child there. And so I just laid in bed for months and months, very depressed at what I had done. And finally, when I started to get out of bed, I tried to kill myself any way I could. I used drugs and engaged in all kinds of risky behaviors because I hated myself. I couldn't love me. How could anybody else love me? And much less, how could God love me? I murdered my own child. So I went to therapy because my parents realized that I was engaging in these things. And the therapist, different therapists would say, "Oh, you're major depressive, you're bipolar, you're this, you're that." They would put me on all these different medications, and nothing ever worked. And finally, I found this one therapist, and I said, "What do you think my problem is?" And she said, "Well, I think you're, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder because of your abortion." And I was like, "That's not it. Not it, not a chance." And so one day, she gave me a pamphlet for a Rachel's Vineyard retreat, and she said, "You're going, I've paid for it, I'm not taking no for an answer." And I was like, okay. And in that one weekend, my life completely changed. I felt God's forgiveness like I had never experienced that connection with Him. And His forgiveness just fell down all around me, and I left that place after that weekend a changed person. And I decided that I was not going to be silent, and I was not going to shut my mouth. I was going to tell everybody and every woman that this is not an answer to your problems. It's not going to go away. I thought it would just go away. It doesn't go away. I remember thinking when I was trying to make that decision, why not give my child up for adoption? Well, I can't do that. Then I'd never get to see them. What kind of logic was that in my head? But it made perfect sense then. I was like, if I have abortion, it'll just go away. If I give it up for adoption, I'll never get to see them. Now I know my child would be 15 years old, and I would know that some family loved her very much, that she had a beautiful life, and that I gave that to her. But instead, I've suffered for 15 years, and I've realized that that was not a good choice. And so that's why I speak about it, and I am completely open to any questions afterwards if you want to ask. If you know any people that are considering abortion or have been hurt by abortion, please, I am open to talking to them. Thank you.